I want to take a few minutes, it's unusual for me, but I'm going to do it, to talk about the Pope. I don't normally talk about popes. I'm not into religion. Please don't take this in any negative way. I feel the same about all religions. So I don't mean to pick on the Pope, but I'm becoming a fan. I'm becoming a fan of the new Pope, Pope Francis, because of what he's saying. I don't have a lot of time, so I'm not going to talk to you about the document a few weeks or months ago about the climate. That was a very big one. A lot of people have heard about that. I want to talk about his views on economics, because that's what we deal with here. And those have been remarkable, particularly the things he said over the last month or so when he's been traveling through Latin America, in Bolivia and several other places. Absolutely remarkable for those of you that have not heard this. I'm only going to give you a few quotes and then talk a little bit about it. There has to be, said the Pope, quote, a structural change to a global economy, the one we have. There has to be a structural change to a global economy that runs counter to the plan of Jesus. Whoa. You all got that? The system in place, the global economy we have, which some people, not a lot, but some, call capitalism, our system, quote, runs counter to the plan of Jesus. Whoa. And this is the head of a church with 700 million, or whatever the number is, people around the world. One of the, is it more? Did I get the numbers wrong? Billion. Okay, 1 billion people. This is amazing, it seems to me. As has been pointed out by a very interesting writer on this subject named Christopher Hale, that some of you may encounter. He writes for Time magazine, among others. He writes about the Catholic Church a lot, and is himself a part of the Catholic Church. As Hale says, the Pope in Bolivia and elsewhere is calling for a new social revolution from below. The change has to come, and it's going to be the poor and the downtrodden who make it happen. And then when he says that, he says it repeatedly, he ends with the following sentence. I want you to, he's speaking in Bolivia to 200,000 people. I want you to know that I and my church are with you. Whoa. The Catholic Church has something called social teaching. It's quite old. It's been around a long time. And one of the ideas that other popes have spoken about is the dignity of labor. They make statements about the dignity of labor. Pope Francis basically said we have to go beyond that. That a Christian, he's getting larger now, it's not just the Catholics, Christians have to be committed to the following, that every person has enough to eat, has a proper home to live in, and has a job. Let me do that again. Every person, if you're a Christian, and he says, by the way, it's a commandment. It's not something that Christians ought to do. It's a commandment. It's what God wants you to do, is to produce an economy that guarantees a job for everyone. And if you don't do that, you are not consistent with the Christian church, with the Christian religion. We haven't had a pope talk like that for a long time. And you're going to hear about this more and more, because he's really just begun in recent months to talk quite like this, and to do it repeatedly, and to do it with growing intensity. So that's going to ramify. And one of the places you're going to see something really remarkable is in 2 months, the Pope is coming to the United States and will address a joint session of the United States Congress, invited there by Catholic Republicans who have in the last 3 weeks begun among themselves and openly in their blogs to ask themselves the question, have we made a terrible mistake? And that includes Mr. John, I don't know how to pronounce the poor man. He had to go through high school with that name, can you imagine? But in any case, so that's why it became Boehner, even though that's not what it is, and so forth and so on. I won't go into that, although you really should enjoy it. The most enjoyment you'll get out of that man, no matter what happens. But you might get an interesting scene when the Pope shakes hands with these Republicans, whether they're Catholic or not, and then tells them either something toned down because he knows who he's talking to, or maybe he'll choose not to tone it down, and that will be a remarkable moment. And I wouldn't want to miss that if I were you, but it is remarkable that a Pope is talking like that. And so if I may be allowed a comment, which I just do as an economic analyst, not as a religious person at all, you might want to ask yourself the question. I mean, I certainly don't know the motives, neither of Pope Francis nor of the Church, behind what they're doing. But I could guess, as an outsider who doesn't know, that if I were the Roman Catholic Church, I'm not, in case you hadn't realized that already, but if I were the Roman Catholic Church, I would recognize that it hasn't been real good for us over recent decades. People are becoming more secular, people are losing interest in religious things altogether, but in the Catholic Church in particular. Then we've had now, I don't know how many years of the priest's abuse of children and all of that you all know about. It's not been a good time. How might the Church, if it were interested, I don't know if it is, but if the Church were interested in recouping some of the prestige and reputation it once had, you might be seeing a Church realizing that the way to get back into what it once had as a sense of people's admiration, people's feeling of solidarity with the Church, that they have to do something to offset what has happened recently. And the way to do that is to look around the world and to see that things are falling apart, that the gap between rich and poor is becoming extremely severe, country after country after country, that no one is speaking for the mass of the poor people in many places. And why? One of the reasons is this is the United States, because the United States has set itself the task for 50 years of finding every secular revolutionary movement and squashing it wherever they can. Okay, but there's consequences. If you remove the political movements, the socialists, the communists, all of that, country by country, then you've left for the mass of poor people no way, organized way to express their anger, their resentment, their demand for change. They can't do it secularly, so the frustration is rising. And so it might be very, very smart for the Roman Catholic Church to say, we'll do it. We will be the spokesperson, and we will rebuild our ranks, our strength, our power by articulating something that the growing mass of the people need and want, and nobody else is available to do it. Would be an interesting twist of how human history has evolved, and it would make of what what Pope Francis is saying and doing a very wise strategy from the perspective of that institution.